Hey everyone, you ready for an amazing story?
Always.
Today, we're diving into the life of Katherine Johnson,
Oh, wow.
a mathematician whose work was super important to
Mhm.
NASA's early space missions.
I'm excited to learn more about her.
And get this, she started college at 15.
15. You're kidding.
Nope.
No.
But hold on, it gets even better. This isn't just about impressive dates. This is about overcoming some serious barriers in a segregated America.
Yeah, achieving the impossible.
Exactly. So before we get to the moon landing,
Okay.
let's rewind to the beginning. Catherine was born in 1918 in West Virginia, where segregation was a harsh reality.
It was a different time for sure.
It was. But even as a young girl, her love for numbers was undeniable.
Really? Like, how young are we talking?
Well, she started high school at 10.
10. Wow, that's incredible.
I know, right? And her father, Joshua, actually moved the whole family so she could attend a high school that offered math courses for black students.
That's a level
Of dedication that really shows how much they believed in her.
Absolutely. Talk about supportive parents. They clearly saw her potential, and they weren't going to let segregation get in the way.
So true. And that support paid off because she graduated college at the young age of 15.
Mm-hmm.
Then fast forward to the 1950s, and the space race is heating up.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Suddenly, those math skills are in high demand. Right.
Absolutely. But remember, this is still a heavily segregated society. Just imagine a black woman walking into a room full of white male colleagues at NASA, which later became NASA. The very idea was unheard of back then.
It makes her accomplishments even more impressive when you consider the challenges she faced just by being in that room.
Oh, absolutely. It must have been incredibly intimidating.
Okay, so we've got this brilliant mathematician in a field dominated by men, especially white men.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the early projects she worked on?
Well, initially, she was assigned to a pool of human computers.
Human computers.
Yes. Women who did all those complex calculations.
Oh, wow.
By hand. This was before powerful electronic computers.
Oh, I see.
So those calculations were crucial for everything, from aircraft design to spaceflight trajectories.
So she was literally doing rocket science before computers could handle it.
Exactly. And she was amazing at it. Her work on analyzing flight test data was so precise and insightful.
Interesting.
She quickly gained respect from her colleagues.
It sounds like she had a real knack for not just the numbers, but understanding
absolutely.
what they meant, which was so valuable.
Yeah, that ability to see the bigger picture was what made her stand out.
So we've got this incredible mind, but she's still working within a system that's, well, designed to hold her back.
Yeah, that's true.
Were there instances where she had to deal with discrimination?
There were. There are accounts of her being forced to use segregated bathrooms. And get this, being excluded from important briefings.
It's just heartbreaking to think that while she was contributing to these groundbreaking advancements, she had to deal with such injustices.
It really highlights how deeply ingrained prejudice was back then.
It does.
But it also makes her resilience even more impressive.
I agree. Her response wasn't anger or resentment. It was just this calm, persistent insistence on her right to be there.
It really makes you wonder what was going through her mind.
Yeah.
Did she ever feel like giving up?
It's hard to know for sure, but from everything I've read, she had this unwavering determination. And this brings us to one of the most famous stories about Katherine Johnson, her involvement with John Glenn's orbital flight. Are you familiar with that one?
Oh, of course. That's the one where John Glenn insisted that Katherine personally double-check the electronic computer's calculations before his mission, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, think about the context here. Early 1960s.
Wow, yeah.
Cold War at its peak. The U.S. is trying to catch up to the Soviets in the space race.
Right.
John Glenn's mission was a huge deal.
It was.
So much pressure.
Huge pressure.
And in that environment, he asks for a black woman in a segregated workplace to verify the work of a computer.
That's a really powerful statement.
It is. It speaks volumes about the trust she'd earned through her skills and accuracy.
Yeah.
This wasn't just about checking for errors. This was about making sure the calculations were absolutely perfect.
Right. Nothing was left to chance. And Glenn knew Katherine was the one for this.
Absolutely. What a powerful testament to her abilities. But can you imagine what that must have felt like for Katherine?
No.
The weight of a
It's hard to even fathom the pressure.
Nation's hopes and an astronaut's life resting on her calculations.
But just imagine the confidence she must have had.
I know, right?
Her own abilities. To step up and say, yes, I'll double-check those numbers.
Talk about a pivotal moment, both for Katherine's career.
It is.
And the perception of women in STEM. Okay, so we've covered her early life, her start at NASA, and this key moment with John Glenn. What comes next in Katherine's story?
Well, her contributions to the space program just continued to grow from there.
I bet.
And you can't talk about Katherine Johnson without talking about Apollo 11.
The moon landing.
Exactly. But before we get there, let's dive into some of the work she did that made these missions possible.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
Yeah, all right.
We're talking Apollo missions. It's just, I don't know, it's mind-blowing.
It is pretty incredible.
But before we get to that giant leap for mankind, what were some of the, behind-the-scenes calculations Katherine Johnson was doing that made it all possible?
Well, for early space flights, one of the biggest challenges was how to get a spacecraft back to Earth safely.
Yeah, it's not like hitting the brakes up in space.
Yeah, right.
I bet this is where her expertise in orbital mechanics comes in.
Exactly. Now, you might be wondering, what is?
Yeah, what is that?
Orbital mechanics, right. Basically, it's understanding how gravity affects things in space. Think of it like figuring out how to throw a ball so that it curves around a pole and lands back in your hand. But instead of a ball, it's a spacecraft, and instead of a pole, it's Earth.
So Katherine Johnson was figuring out how to make the spacecraft do this gravitational dance to come back home.
Exactly. And she was doing all of this with the limited computing power of the time.
Oh, wow. Lots of, slide rules and pencils.
Yeah, lots of those. And brain power, of course.
Wow. So for these early missions, she calculated trajectories for both Alan Shepard and John Glenn, America's first astronauts.
She did. She was literally charting the course for the very first Americans in space. And not just getting them up and back, she also developed procedures for mid-flight course corrections.
So it's not just the initial math. It's like problem solving in real time with, lives on the line.
Very high stakes.
It was. The fact that she consistently delivered accurate and reliable calculations under that pressure, that says a lot about her skill and her focus.
It really does. So we know she was basically a trajectory wizard.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Apollo 11, the moon landing. What did she specifically do for that mission?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Well, Apollo 11 was much more complex than anything NASA had tried before. This was about traveling to the moon, landing, and then returning safely. This meant dealing with the gravity of both the Earth and the moon, which is not easy.
It sounds like a math problem on steroids.
One crucial part was making sure the lunar module...
The part that lands on the moon.
Yes. Yeah. Making sure that could detach, go down to the surface, and then safely rejoin the command module.
So 2 spacecraft doing this, intricate dance in space.
Yeah, exactly.
How did Katherine Johnson help make that happen?
Her expertise in orbital mechanics was crucial here. She calculated the trajectory and timing for the lunar module to separate, land, and then rejoin the command module.
Wow.
Even a small miscalculation could have been catastrophic.
She was basically choreographing this delicate maneuver with the whole world watching.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, they were still using a mix of computers and human calculations to make sure everything was perfect. It's amazing they were able to do it with the technology they had.
It is. Knowing how important her calculations were, did she ever talk about that pressure?
What's interesting is that Katherine Johnson approached all her work with a sense of calm and confidence.
Wow, amidst all that pressure.
She once said, "I was just doing my job."
Wow. It's like she had this quiet confidence, even when she was dealing with these groundbreaking, never-been-done-before calculations.
Exactly. And that confidence made her so effective.
Right.
She knew her stuff. She trusted her skills. She just got it done.
Okay, so beyond the numbers and the trajectories, what kind of impact did she have on the culture at NASA?
Well, just her being there as a Black woman in a mostly white male field challenged the status quo, and she wasn't alone.
Oh.
There were other brilliant African-American women working as human computers, like Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson.
So they were kind of a powerhouse trio.
You could say that.
Yeah.
All incredibly talented mathematicians and engineers. Their work was crucial to the space program. But their presence also forced NASA to look at its own biases and start to break down those barriers.
They were pioneers in so many ways, advancing science and pushing for social change at the same time.
They showed that brilliance can come from anywhere.
Yes.
And that when you give opportunities to people from different backgrounds, everyone wins.
Okay, so we've talked about her work at NASA. What about her impact on the world beyond that?
Well, Katherine Johnson's story became a symbol of what's possible when you break down barriers. She became a role model for young girls and students of color who saw in her a reflection of their own potential. She proved you can achieve incredible things even when facing adversity.
It's such an inspiring message.
If
she could do all this in a time when she couldn't even use the same bathroom as her white colleagues, then what can't we do? Right.
Exactly. That's why her story is still important today. It reminds us that we all have the power to make a difference, to push those boundaries, and to create a more just world. But there's one more piece of her legacy I want to touch on.
I'm listening.
We've focused on her achievements, which are amazing, but there's also Katherine Johnson, the woman behind the math. And from everything we know, she was remarkable.
Tell me more about the person behind the calculations.
Katherine Johnson was humble and gracious, despite all she accomplished. She was known for her confidence, her laugh, and her love for family and community.
That's heartwarming. Like this amazing intellect, but also so grounded.
Exactly. That balance is something we can all aim for. To strive for greatness, but also to stay true to our values.
So we've covered a lot. Her early life, her journey at NASA, the Apollo missions, even a peek into her personal life. What is the lasting impact? What do we take away from all this?
Well, I think Katherine Johnson's legacy is so much more than just numbers and trajectories. It's about human potential and perseverance.
Absolutely. Her story shows us that brilliance has no color.
Right.
And genius has no gender. When we dream big and work hard, we can achieve anything. It's incredible.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting. We often hear about these amazing people from history, and it's easy to, like, put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
But with Katherine Johnson, she never seemed to want the spotlight.
That's true. She was so humble, always giving credit to her colleagues.
Right.
She always say, I was just doing my job. But that's what makes her story so powerful. It's not about fame. It's about being great at what you do, pushing those boundaries and making a difference.
And that difference goes beyond just science, right?
Oh, absolutely.
She was a role model,
yeah,
especially for women and minorities.
Yeah. For anyone who ever felt underestimated, her story shows you can overcome anything and achieve greatness no matter who you are.
Like, she was proof that talent comes from everywhere.
Yes.
And when we open up opportunities for everyone, we all win.
Exactly. And that's why her story still matters today.
It does.
It makes us think about our own biases, you know, and how we can create a more inclusive world where everyone can reach their full potential.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Katherine Johnson's life, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from it?
I want them to remember that this isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It's a call to action for all of us, you know?
To create that world where everyone has a chance to reach their full potential.
Exactly.
That's amazing. And on that note, we'll end our deep dive.
Okay.
But keep her story in mind this week. Remember her brilliance, her perseverance, her spirit, and ask yourself, what barriers will you break?
That's a good question.
What impossible dream will you make possible?
And what legacy will you leave behind?
Another great question. Let's all think about that. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you on the next deep dive.